New week of Liberty Free to Be. Hope you are outside enjoying some sunshine. It's gorgeous outside today. I can't wait to have a weekend in the sun, and I am absolutely gutted that I missed the aurora last night. Everyone was showing these amazing photos of Northern Lights, and I fell asleep and missed it, so I'm hoping I might see it tonight. But yeah, lovely weekend ahead. Today I am talking to Niki Woods. Niki Woods has written a book. And there's so much talk now about the menopause, and it's brilliant that we're having more open conversations. Lots of women's groups, social media is flooded with information, doctors are online. So it feels like there's a real shift. But what about our partners, our loved ones? What about the men in our life? What about in our workplace? So Niki Woods, who has written this, the man's guide to menopause. Niki Woods is a coach. She's an online coach. She deals in fitness, nutrition, mindset, and all about menopause and midlife. So I'm really looking forward to finding out how important it is that we have men in our lives as allies in the workplace, at home, what she's learnt from talking to men whilst writing this book, and also some interesting information about how we can help ourselves going through this journey. So lots to talk about this morning. Grab a coffee and enjoy. So good morning, Niki. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. It's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you too. And I have been showing everybody the man's guide to menopause in your introduction. So congratulations and well done. Before we really get started, to find out a little bit more about you, how do you introduce yourself to people about the work you're doing?
So I always say there's a couple of strands to what I do. So there's my one-to-one work where I'm a coach for women in midlife, where I help them with their fitness, their fat loss, their mindset, their habits, and of course, peri-menopause and menopause. And then there's the work that I do with businesses where I train on menopause, and I talk about how they can support women and men to basically have their best health in midlife, and how we can just make the workplace the best and the workers in the workplace the healthiest they can possibly be during midlife and beyond.
Amazing. And you've got 1,500 members in your Facebook group. You've got a real community behind you, and you are really reaching lots and lots of women, and now men too. And it feels like, Niki, that there's been so much conversations around the menopause now. There's so much more conversations in the press, on social media, all targeted at giving women the knowledge and the power that they need. But it's not just about us, is it? It's about the wider picture is our relationships and our workplace and our partners, and how they find that information. So that's, I'm guessing, is that where the inspiration came from the book?
Yeah, like really, as I was doing my sessions in the workplace and hearing what women were saying, I kind of felt like, well, this is all very woman focused, and almost every time without fail, I'd speak to a man, be that in a social setting or in a workplace setting, or networking something. He'd say something to me like, I wish I'd understood more about this at the time. But then it was quite hard making men feel like they could come to workplace sessions, for example, but then they would come to like a manager session. And then the feedback at the end was always, oh my God, I enjoyed that far more than I thought I was going to. It was so interesting. I can see how this is really changed my opinion and can really help me outside of work as well as in. Mm-hmm. And so many men would say, well, when I've gone and looked for a bit of information, it all understandably seems to be written for women. And that's all very well and good, but I kind of felt like it wasn't that I was meant to read it. And I was like, there's this huge, big gap here that men need to be supported into the conversation, but talked actually directly to, rather than having to kind of peek over our shoulder and feel like they're looking at stuff that was really not meant for them. Because if we want to include them in the conversation, we need to, I feel, really obviously invite them into the conversation. And then there's also certain perspectives that they might not be aware of that I felt like I wanted to talk about as well.
Yes, yeah. And a really interesting, I'm going to read one of the stats that you've got in the book that I found really interesting, was that in a 2019 survey out of 450 male respondents, 77% of the men reported symptoms negatively affected them as well. And And interesting, 70% reported the symptoms negatively affect their partners, which left 70% of the men feeling their partner's menopause symptoms affected them, but didn't necessarily affect the woman, which I found really interesting.
I know. And it's really sad though, because I'd had conversations with men who they'd be saying things like, I wish I'd understood more because maybe then it would have saved my marriage or my relationship. And then others who had said, I realise now she was trying to protect me and not take things out on me, but at the time I took it personally. And I suspect that those 7% that in the differential of that stat, they think the partner isn't bothered, but I suspect the partner is bothered as well, because most of us in a relationship, if one partner's upset about something, the other one generally is as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's difficult. I guess men are also in a difficult situation because, sometimes my husband and I will joke about a situation that's occurred because of the menopause, and he'll say, it's bad for me too. And, I'm having to go through it. And we kind of make lighthearted talk about it. But it's a fine line, isn't it, between a man not really understanding it, but trying to give you advice, or trying to not patronise you. But I guess having a book like this where they've actually got some knowledge, so the help and the support they give you is based on facts rather than just guessing, will make a big difference.
Yeah. And I think that was the thing, that I wrote this book for men who want to understand the nitty gritty of it. I kind of always say, I've tried to write as like a Haynes guide to menopause, a Haynes manual. So it's kind of for those men that don't just want to know what to say, but also to understand that deeper level of allyship, and also of understanding something that potentially their partner might not even understand. Because if someone's read this and their partner hasn't, they might actually understand more about certain things. Doesn't mean we want to have them explain everything to us, but it's really good to have that kind of background, deeper knowledge of why things are happening, what might be the cause for things that we might not always appreciate on the surface.
Yeah, and it's so prevalent because it's not just about relationships in the home; it's also in the workplace. We're surrounded by women going through the menopause, and it's how do we manage that in the workplace? So, in your experience, because you do a lot of menopause training in the workplace, don't you? Have you seen a difference in the last few years? Has it become a better place to communicate and to have some understanding in the workplace for women going through perimenopause and menopause?
I think that's a yes and no answer, to be honest. For example, if we look at the CIPD survey from 2019 compared to 2023, because they do it every 4 years, almost nothing has changed in terms of the respondents, which is quite depressing, really. Yeah. But what I do think has changed is that the general awareness, be that from workplace sessions or for peer support of women, and therefore understanding how to signpost to help, has improved. And I think we've got some amazing male allies as well now that we didn't have before, simply because knowledge is power.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is that if you're to put on just a general workplace awareness session, the normal people who will attend, normally it will start with women of a certain age. The younger women think, oh, I don't need to know that yet still. And then the men, for one reason or another, if you just put a one and done session on as a tick box exercise, they're probably not going to attend. But when organisations have committed themselves to trying to embed a culture change and trying to communicate to different groups, that's when I'm seeing some really, really amazing new levels of culture change, of support, and of allyship, which I think really benefits everything around the culture. So the organisations who are doing things well are carrying that through to their menopause support and awareness. The organisations who are doing tick box exercises are doing a tick box exercise. The other organisations are literally sticking their head in the sand still. So I think it comes down to what the original kind of ethos and culture of an organisation is as to where they sit still, unfortunately.
Yeah. And how do we, what, in your experience, what has been the best way to engage men? Other than obviously I'm going to pass this book to my husband, now I've read it. But how do you find the best way to engage men? I know you've now got a Man's Guide to Menopause Facebook group, haven't you? How's that been going?
Again, it's something that everyone said, oh my God, it's such a brilliant idea. I think it's brilliant. Loads of men seem to not be on Facebook, so that hasn't helped. But it's been this, the first people into the group were people who were already along the journey, who were already allies, who were already aware of the situation, who'd already done work on themselves in their relationship, in the workplace. Which actually is amazing because I've got some really incredible, knowledgeable guys in there. What I haven't had is like this massive flood of men going, please, please, because I think men don't normally join things like that until they realise they need to. So they don't go, oh, well, I might need to know that, so I'll join. They do it when they need to. I think that's true for us women as well, but to even more of an extent for men. When I talk to organisations, they're really tempted to just say, well, I'll put an awareness session on and see who comes. And obviously men can come as well. And I always say to them, this isn't me trying to get you to do more than one session just for my benefit, but I really strongly recommend that you do separate sessions. Because if you do a general awareness session, most men will either feel uncomfortable, that they feel like maybe they shouldn't be there, that the women would want to have a safe space for themselves, or the talk of the stigma hasn't been reduced enough for people to feel like they could attend, or the men will feel that they would be the only man who would go, or they'd be worried they'd say the wrong thing. And I really strongly feel that the most effective way to have a really positive, productive session is with a men-only session. Like I did one last week for an organisation, and everyone from the director downwards, all the men attended, and they were so positive and so really wanting to learn, but they felt very relaxed because there was only men and me there. So certain conversations that I feel like I could broach conversations differently with no other women there. So it was a safer space for the men. And I felt like as a result, their learning experience was better. They were able to be much more vulnerable in what they were kind of expressing. And the only other way I've ever felt that men have that experience, but it's slightly different, is if you do like a manager training course where they haven't got a choice but to attend.
Right.
If you leave it up to them and it's just a general awareness session, they'll feel like they probably shouldn't attend.
Yeah.
If you do a separate man session, you will get some men attending. If you do a general manager training where it's a bit of a 3-line whip, the feedback's always fantastic, but the men always say, I thought I wouldn't find this interesting and I found it fascinating, or I didn't really want to come and now I am so glad I did, and I know I can use this at home as well. So really, to stop waffling about it, it's that I always recommend organisations do start with separate groups, and then when people are further down the line and the stigma's reduced, the taboo's reduced, people are more comfortable, maybe you can have some together sessions with men and women together sharing information.
Yeah.
But there's certain topics that women won't ever feel particularly comfortable talking about with men in the room, or maybe not even at all at work, and that's fine, because not everyone wants to talk about their vagina with their colleagues, for example.
Yeah,
and that's fine. Fair enough.
It's a hard conversation sometimes for people to have just within a relationship, because it's such a personal thing and it feels like such an attack on your womanhood when things start going wrong and you're not in control of it. So I can see how in the workplace that would be, equally hard. So I think it's a really good idea to have 2 separate sessions where the men get the knowledge they need and shown how they can support us without being patronising, without mansplaining things to us, but in a safe space. It makes complete sense.
Yeah. And it's very difficult because sometimes some men in certain situations, they'll feel like everything they say and do is wrong.
Yes.
And to admit that is, you have to be it makes you feel very vulnerable to be able to admit that, but also it's quite frustrating. And I don't want to have a situation where a man would say that and get jumped on by someone.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes if you just dumped everyone together straight away, someone will get shot down for something that they we're being very vulnerable about, or someone will ask a genuine question where they want to learn something and they'll get told off that they should have known that already. And
Yeah.
that's not what happens to have a positive, that's not going to be a positive conversation.
Yeah.
And likewise, women need a safe space to say their frustrations without men feeling like they're being slagged off, basically.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you do a lot of personal coaching as well with women. How difficult do you think women are saying that it is difficult to talk to their partners about what's going on? Do women still find it difficult to communicate how they're feeling? Do they try and hide it, or is it much more of an open conversation?
I think it really depends on the individual and the relationship, but I think that what we as women don't like feeling like we're doing is just whinging. And
Mm,
sometimes it feels like there's so many little things that are going on
yeah.
that if we were to recount all of them, we would literally be like this broken record Winterfest of everything that's gone wrong. But that's actually genuinely what we're experiencing at sometimes.
Yeah.
With, if you feel like you've got a bajillion symptoms and you've tried to get listened to by a doctor and you've just get pushback, for example, and you're exhausted and you're trying to juggle your work, your career, your caring responsibilities, etc., then I think sometimes women just go, you know what, I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm just going to grit my teeth and get on with it because
Yeah.
that's what I need to do. And that's what's really difficult, because then you'll get to a situation where a lot of it hasn't been expressed and then it will come out as a snapping or an anger or I wish you'd understood this, when actually it's not being communicated.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that women, I don't know about you, but I think for me and for a lot of us, it kind of takes us by surprise how young it starts. And this is really shocking when men learn this as well, but also how
Yes.
many things it can affect and
Yeah.
potentially how profoundly it can impact certain things. And sometimes that's really difficult for women to express when they're trying to juggle everything else, but also because of the stigma of aging and gendered ageism,
Yes.
it's quite difficult because sometimes it can make us feel quite vulnerable to talk about some of this stuff. And of course, not everyone feels comfortable, like you said, talking about some of the more intimate parts of what could be impacted. And I mean, I'm very forthright, and when I do my training or when I talk to my clients, I'll literally ask them about vaginal dryness, things
Mm,
like that, libido,
yeah.
etc. But
Yeah.
people aren't necessarily comfortable talking about it, and
No.
especially with their partner, because there's that emotional aspect of it as well. If
Yeah.
something's different than it used to be,
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and what I found really interesting, there was a whole section in the book about kind of the mental impact, the mental well-being impact. And one of the key things that I really struggled with that completely took me by surprise was anxiety. That I'd never really, I probably suffered with it when I was a teenager, going through hormonal changes, but nothing since. And all of a sudden, I have days where I could give up everything I'm doing and stop and just want to run and hide. And then other days, I feel like I can conquer the world. There's no rationality to it. It's completely up and down, which I can understand is really frustrating from a husband's point of view. But it has taken me by surprise. And what I loved about your book is it really did explain it all in a really logical way that has helped me kind of think, okay, well, this is what's going on with my hormones. This is why I'm acting like I am. And it'll help my husband understand where I am as well. But symptoms like that, like the anxiety, is that something you experienced as well? Because I know you've been going through symptoms. Has that something that caught you by surprise?
I haven't had the anxiety much at all, actually. Possibly because I just go, fuck it, I'm just going to carry on anyway, and I'll just not think about things.
Yeah.
My main symptoms that I've talked about at length with people before is my terrible experience when I had no testosterone and I
Mm,
literally couldn't function. And if I had been responsible for small humans at that point, I do not know what I would have done
mm,
or had to go to work or something. That's been one that if I hadn't have been bloody minded and tried to get to the bottom of, I don't know, would I have just curled up in a corner and died? It
mm.
was ridiculous.
So
And
how
then
did
my
you do that? Because testosterone is not available on the NHS, is it? because it is something that I'm really interested in, because I know that my motivation levels have dipped. I don't have as much energy. So I am starting to think, well, maybe my testosterone levels aren't quite right. But I equally know it's not something that's available on the NHS. So how do you get about testing for it and getting it?
So it is available on the NHS, but it's not as easy to get. So
Right.
if you go to a GP, they can prescribe the estrogen and the progesterone.
Yeah.
The issue with the testosterone is that most NHS formularies, which is the list that GPs can work from to prescribe, don't have that on as something that's a licensed product for women. It can be used off license, and loads of drugs are used off license. But most GPs' formularies won't let them initiate the prescribing. So someone either has to go private or go to the NHS menopause clinic. Once someone has been treated by the NHS menopause clinic and given that prescription, they can then refer them back, discharge them back to the GP and ask the GP to take over prescribing. Testosterone is a little bit different than the other two hormones, in that there's still a lot of lack of knowledge around it and fear around it, that someone's going to grow a beard or grow a penis or something, which I don't have a beard or a penis, and it's changed my life for the better. So the the thing is with testosterone that you do need to check before someone starts what their level is, and also you do need to check once they're on it that the level's not getting too high, because obviously testosterone being too high is associated with certain things, not just the side effects, but things like PCOS, for example. The other issue we've got with testosterone is that the NICE guidelines say it's only allowed to be prescribed for libido.
Right.
Now, my personal opinion is that the word libido doesn't just refer to sex, it refers to your energy for life.
Yes.
And if you look at what happens when men have low testosterone, they have lack of motivation, lack of focus, brain fog, muscle loss, physical weakness, etc. That to me is libido, not just sex.
Yeah.
And again, we could have a whole conversation about, the kind of misogyny in viewing that the only reason women should have libido in the broader sense is sex and to keep the
Yes.
husband happy.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that for me, I was so struggling. I couldn't do my work because my brain just wasn't functioning. I was already on estrogen and progesterone at that point, which is another thing the NHS recommends. But for a lot of us, we do need that little bit of something else, of that third hormone that is our hormone and we have had that hormone all along, to
Yeah.
give us back that pizzazz of being able to think and function. But the thing is that it is quite difficult to get just, the GPs to get to that point. There is a long waiting list for it. Unfortunately, the research hasn't been done. So people say the research evidence is not there that it helps with anything other than libido. That's the party line across the International Menopause and the British Menopause Societies. But anecdotally, if you talk to a lot of practitioners and if you talk to a lot of private and NHS practitioners who specialise in menopause, they will say it has given people their energy back. It has given people their brain power back. It has given them their strength, their ability finally to lose weight and things like that as well.
Yeah.
And I'm very much one of those people who think that we do need more research in it, but we really, really need to stop just thinking about it in terms of libido. And I feel like it's quite a feminist issue, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I was just thinking about how, having an ally in the home and in the workplace when you are trying to battle to get heard in the doctors, would make a big help to some people that are really struggling to find that support. I've been really lucky with my doctors. They've been really understanding, but I know some women that have had to really fight for everything to be heard. And having somebody there that completely gets it, that can be in their corner for them, would be a big help, wouldn't it?
And I think that's something that men don't actually realise until it's explained to them, that they'll think, well, you've got this problem, go to your doctor and get the treatment. And they don't realise that it can take, an average of 10 appointments. I mean, God, who manages to get 10 appointments? Think how long that takes
Yeah.
to actually get the treatment, and they don't realize how, quite frankly, gaslit women are being about these things, and that we're going and we're saying, this is my situation, these are my symptoms, and that we're literally getting told, go away, or, oh, just eat better, or whatever. And I think sometimes they're really shocked about that. And as you say, it's so good to have someone to be able to go, well, let's keep a symptom tracker diary, or, you know,
Yeah.
backing you up, be that in person or just emotionally supporting. Because that can make all the difference when you're fighting what it feels like is a losing battle against your hormones and your energy levels and the medical system.
Yeah. Especially when your brain's not functioning properly. You know, I had when I was perimenopause and I didn't really know what was going on, you start questioning your mental ability, you start questioning everything and doubting yourself. So if I can imagine, if Mark had had the information back then, he would have been able to say to me, well, listen, you know, let's rationalise this. This is why you're feeling like this. Let's try and do something about it together. You're not going mad. This is just, you know, part of what you're going through. That definitely would have been much more reassuring than kind of going into it feet first without that support. So
And also,
I actually think male doctors need to read this as well, Nikki. I think, can we get that into GP practitioners? That would be amazing.
to be honest, I think half the female doctors probably need to read it as well, because I mean, I know so many people, myself included, who had issues with trying to get listened to by female doctors as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, when I first went to the doctors, when I've actually moved clinics now, but the first experience was on the telephone, a young female doctor turning around to me and saying, well, you probably know more about this than I do. What do you think? I'm like, well, I'm ringing you up for help here and you don't even know. It's so yeah, and luckily I did manage to switch to somebody that was understanding, but it's just an extra fight when you don't really need it, isn't it?
It is. And the thing is as well that, like, a lot of the symptoms that, yes, it might be that HRT is needed, but there are so many other things that can make a massive difference. Like, lifestyle is utterly underestimated in its power to transform our health for perimenopause, menopause, and our health in aging, full stop. Nutrition, movement, exercise, sleep, stress management.
Yeah.
And all of that, having a partner who's on side and understands that and isn't, you know, just literally things like, shall we go for a walk? Rather than trying to sit on the sofa, having someone who's encouraging that, or encouraging with compassion if someone feels like they don't understand why they're gaining weight and they're doing everything, but supporting through trying to eat healthier, for example, or being supportive of what meals are being cooked, or where you go to eat, or
What
you
snacks
know,
you have in the house? Yeah. I completely see how that will be a big help. And you do a lot of coaching with women, one-to-one personal coaching, and it is about that lifestyle. I mean, I'm on HRT as well, and progesterone, which has been great, but I have had to change the things that I eat to my diet. I can't have pasta now because it just makes my tummy bloated. Alcohol kills me. What are your key changes that you make that you kind of recommend to women when they first come to you? What are some of the really simple things that they can do to try and help their lifestyle changes?
so alcohol that you mentioned, yeah, alcohol is not my friend either.
No.
And there's a very good biological reason for that. And yeah, there's some women who do drink a lot and feel like it helps them, but really it's terrible for our breast cancer risk and for all other sorts. So my recommendation is always try and cut down, cut out. It will make a massive difference to tons of things around health and symptoms. With nutrition, there is evidence that the lesser amount of processed food in someone's diet and ultra processed food, the less likely they are to get menopause symptoms and the less severe they're going to be. So just cleaning up your diet is a really positive first step. The other thing that is on nutrition a massive issue for women, especially women with a really long history of dieting. One is not having enough protein, so I always end up having to put people's protein content of their diet up. But two, it's under eating and snacking rather than real balanced meals.
Yes.
So I always have people do a bit of a palate cleanse at the beginning, but I put them into meals. We might have one planned snack, but we will have meals, and they will have protein, carbs, healthy fats, and lots of veg in. So there will be balanced meals. That's how I approach it
Yeah.
to get my clients to have much better energy and start losing fat. Obviously, you do need to understand the difference between eating for health and eating for fat loss as well. Most midlife women don't move enough as general non-exercise movement. So the power of walking, just walking around is massive for mental and physical health. But I very often find that people will be stuck at the desk working, feeling like they can't take a break, and really have to kind of coach them into getting a higher step count, understanding how to do that really easily through the day without feeling like missing out on things. That's massive.
Yeah.
With exercise, resistance training is absolutely a game changer for us in terms of keeping our muscle mass and keeping our bones strong. That's the toned look everyone's searching for. You can't get that without doing resistance training. And that's quite difficult for people who haven't never done any exercise before, because there is a learning curve of understanding how to challenge your body with challenging levels of weights. And people either go too hard too much and then they hurt, or they don't push themselves enough, and it really is a learning curve to get to that. Sleep's a massive one. Obviously, our sleep can be impacted. I kind of have two sleeps quite often now and a gap in the middle in
I've
the
been up to
night because of that
4 this
waking up
morning.
thing.
Yeah, I've been up to top of 4 this morning. And by
Yeah,
about 3 o'clock, I will feel like I need a 15-minute nap.
yeah. And the thing is, there's loads we can do to support ourselves getting good sleep. And most people aren't doing it. And it's things like not being on your phone all night, not doing revenge bedtime procrastination, turning all the blue lights off. I wear blue light blocking glasses, not having caffeine, magnesium really helps. All of those things, they do make a massive difference. Even with all that, you still might get the 4 o'clock waking. And I just tend to have to I sometimes even get up and do some work and go back to sleep. But
I do.
I don't have young children, so I can do that.
Yeah.
But it's about trying to optimize everything at the beginning of the sleep cycle so that even if that happens, you've got as many hours in early doors as
Yeah.
you can, so it has less
Yeah.
impact. And then managing stress as well, which is the hard one, but it does make a massive difference.
Yeah, I must admit, I've just started doing weights at the gym, and it's all new to me. And I think there's also a generation of women that are in the 40s and 50s now that went through that whole period of, feel the burn and no pain, no gain. And so it really put a lot of people off exercise because they felt like it was a chore or it was a punishment. And it's getting to find an exercise that you enjoy doing and not thinking that you've got to kind of go and kill yourself at the gym for 2 hours. Like you said, you can get outside and walk and go for a gorgeous walk on it for an hour and burn calories and get out, and actually for your mental well-being as well. But women aren't very good at putting themselves first, are they? So taking that time out to do it in the first place, that's the kind of hurdle to get over.
Yeah. And the thing is that a lot of things like doing the exercise actually can reduce things like anxiety as well.
Yeah.
There's research evidence about it, but also you're burning off some of that nervous energy. But what I remember a client a couple of years ago now said in a kind of a group call situation, she said, I feel guilty if I'm taking the time to exercise
Yeah.
because I've got, the demands of my family, the kids, whatever. And so I said to the other clients who were on the call, does anyone want to give their perspective on this as parents? Because I'm not a parent, so I can say, my coachy opinion, but I'd rather hear from people who genuinely are parents. And the other people were saying, I see it as me being a better parent because I'm demonstrating my own self-care. I'm also potentially demonstrating to my children, the importance of exercise, of fitness, of strength, etc.
Yeah.
And I also know I'm a better parent, a calmer parent, if I've had that time to myself as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that as women, we feel guilty for doing so many things. And it's about flipping that sometimes and saying, you know what, maybe I should feel guilty for not doing it instead and actually do it, or rather not feel guilty at all, because I don't want anyone to feel guilty one way or the other. So I've worded that poorly, actually. But instead of feeling guilty for taking something positive, put your own oxygen mask on, feel like that's the best thing to do for everyone involved, because you're looking after your own health and you're demonstrating positive behaviours.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And hopefully anyone that's listening that needed that little pep talk, I hope you take it on board and get yourself out today doing something that you enjoy just for you. And where can we find this book, Niki? Where can we find it?
It's available on Amazon. It's available in paperback, as you can see, and also in Kindle. So if you prefer it electronically, you just go to Amazon, pop in The Man's Guide to Menopause, and it will be there.
Amazing. Well done you for getting it out there. And I really hope it reaches the men that really need it and that it can help build that supportive ally network. I think it's fabulous. My last question that I ask all my guests. So if you were to pay yourself a compliment, Niki, what would it be?
You're doing a lot better than you give yourself credit for.
Yes, absolutely. And you are. You're doing an amazing job. So keep going. And my last question, liberty free to be. What does that mean to you?
So for me, it means the freedom of things that constrained us when we were younger. So, for example, the worry of what people might think, and the knowledge that we can take action to improve our present and our future.
Amazing. And where can people find you on social media and your Facebook group?
So I've got a women's Facebook group called Your Best Midlife. The man's Facebook group is called The Man's Guide to Menopause. I am most present on LinkedIn, where I'm Niki with 1K Woods. And then on Facebook and on Instagram, I'm Niki Woods Best Midlife.
Amazing. I'll put all those links on the show notes as well, and well remembered. That's a great list. And thank you so much. I've been following you for quite a few years now. You and I have had lots of conversations, and I know all the amazing work that's really valuable that you're doing. So keep going, and thank you for championing women, but also including men in the conversation. Guide to Menopause is out now. Like Niki says, it's available on Amazon. I'm going to hand my copy to Mark now I've read it, and yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think it's a really important part of the conversation, isn't it, to bring the men in our life, whether it's our partners or in relationships or the workforce as well, to make sure that we have that extra support, because it affects everybody in society. It's not just about the woman that's going through it, it's about how we can get the best support moving forward from society, and men are part of that. So great conversation with Niki. Well done to her for getting that conversation started. I will be back in a fortnight. I'm off to enjoy some sunshine. I hope you have a great weekend. Keep being